The auditorium lights dimmed as a quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. Hundreds of students, athletes, and dreamers filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the stage. The banner above read, "Rise again, the power of perseverance." Then, without fanfare or music, Manny Pacquiao walked in. No bodyguards, no flash. Just a simple white shirt and that familiar humble smile. The crowd erupted in applause, but Manny simply bowed his head and waved gently. He wasn't there as a celebrity or a politician today. He was there as a man who had walked through struggle and come out stronger. When he reached the podium, he paused for a moment, letting the room settle. You could hear a pin drop. He looked around, his eyes warm yet piercing, and said quietly, "Today I don't want to talk about boxing. I want to talk about life." That one line silenced every whisper in the hall. Everyone had come expecting stories of training, championship fights, and world titles. But this was different. This was deeper. Manny continued, his voice calm but firm. "Some people see me now and think, he's a champion, a millionaire, a legend. But they don't see the boy who sold bread in the streets just to eat. They don't see the nights I slept hungry or the days I fought not in the ring, but against poverty." The crowd listened, not just hearing but feeling every word. His tone wasn't proud. It was grateful. He smiled faintly, looked down for a moment, then said, "I stand here not because I am the strongest fighter. I stand here because I refuse to give up." A wave of emotion moved through the audience. You could see people nodding, whispering to one another, their eyes wide with respect. And then, with that same quiet energy, Manny said something that would set the stage for the rest of his talk. "If you want to win in life, you don't need power, money, or fame. You need faith, hard work, and heart." What Manny said next left every single person in that hall completely speechless. Manny took a deep breath, his eyes reflecting memories far from the shining lights of the arena. He spoke softly, not like a superstar talking to fans, but like an older brother talking to his family. "When I was a boy," he began, "I didn't have shoes. I didn't have lunch money. I didn't even have dreams big enough to imagine this moment." He smiled gently, remembering. "I sold bread on the streets of General Santos. Sometimes I would run after buses, shouting to sell one more piece, because that one sale meant food for my family that night." The audience listened, their faces turning serious. You could feel the energy shifting, from excitement to deep respect. "I didn't grow up with comfort. I grew up with struggle. And sometimes that's better, because struggle teaches you what comfort cannot." He paused, then lifted his hand, curling it into a fist. "I trained in broken gyms. I ran barefoot on rocky roads. My gloves were torn, my stomach empty, but my heart was full of fire." The audience clapped softly, inspired by the imagery. Manny continued, "Many people laughed at me. They said, 'Look at that skinny kid and he'll never be a champion.' But you see, it's not the size of your body that decides your destiny. It's the size of your belief." He looked around the room, scanning rows of young faces, students, and dreamers. "Sometimes the world will doubt you before you even start, but you must never doubt yourself." He pointed toward the crowd as if speaking to each person individually. "When no one believes in you, you must become your own supporter." A small group in the front row began to record on their phones, not to go viral, but to capture a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Manny smiled again and said, "When I started boxing, I didn't even think about championships. I just wanted to survive. But life has a funny way. When you give your best even without expecting anything, life gives you back more than you imagined." The crowd nodded, hanging on to his every word. "Every morning I woke up before the sun. I ran, I trained, I prayed, and every night I told myself, one day my hard work will speak louder than my hunger." He placed his hand over his heart. "That's the secret. You must keep going even when you're tired. You must keep believing even when no one claps for you." The hall filled with silence again, not awkward but powerful. A silence that meant they were absorbing every word. Then Manny said something that sent chills through the room. "Success is not about how fast you reach the top. It's about how many times you rise after falling." Applause broke out, not wild cheering but heartfelt. Students began to nod. Athletes raised their phones, capturing the moment. He ended this part of his story with a gentle smile. "I didn't choose to be a boxer. Life chose it for me, but I chose to never give up, and that made all the difference." The crowd clapped louder now, the cheers echoing across the hall. But Manny simply bowed again, humble as ever. Then he looked into the camera, the one streaming live, and said, "To anyone listening right now, it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you start. Have you ever had people doubt your dreams? Comment below, because your story might inspire someone else watching this right now." The hall was completely silent now. You could feel the weight of every word Manny spoke. He stepped away from the podium, walked slowly to the center of the stage, and said quietly, "You know, people see the victories. They see the belts, the cheers, the bright lights. But they don't see the nights when you lose everything." He paused, eyes fixed somewhere far away, like he was looking back through time. "There was a time," he continued, "when I thought my career was over. I had lost a fight, not just in the ring but in my heart. I was broke, humiliated, and full of doubt. I asked myself, is this the end?" The audience leaned in closer. That night I sat alone in my small room. My hands were swollen. My pride was shattered. For the first time I questioned everything. My purpose, my dreams, even my faith. He clenched his fist gently. I remember whispering, "God, why me? I've worked so hard. I've sacrificed everything. Why am I still failing?" A few people in the front row wiped their eyes. Manny smiled softly, his tone turning warm again. "But you know what I realized? Sometimes when you lose, life isn't punishing you, it's preparing you." The hall filled with a soft murmur of agreement. He raised his hand slightly. "That loss became my turning point. It broke my ego and rebuilt my spirit. It taught me that being a champion isn't about how many times you win. It's about how many times you rise after being knocked down." He took a slow breath. "After that defeat, I trained harder than ever before. I studied every mistake, every weakness. I told myself, I may have fallen, but I will rise with purpose. And when I stepped back into the ring, I didn't fight to prove others wrong, I fought to prove myself right." The crowd erupted in applause, inspired and emotional, but Manny raised his hand to quiet them. "Don't clap for me," he said with a smile. "Clap for yourselves, because every one of you has a fight in your life right now. Maybe not in a boxing ring, but in your heart. You're fighting fear, failure, or doubt, and that makes you fighters too." The words hit deep. Some people nodded. Some looked down, lost in thought. "Remember this," Manny continued. "Failure is not the opposite of success, it's the road to it. Every time you fall, you learn something that victory can never teach." He began pacing slowly, his tone growing more passionate. "When you lose, don't stay down. When people laugh at your dreams, don't listen. When life knocks you to your knees, get up, wipe your tears, and keep punching. Because one day those punches will turn into power." He stopped at the edge of the stage and looked directly into the crowd. Champions are not made when the cameras are on. They're made in silence, and when no one's watching, when you're tired, when you want to quit but you don't. A long pause. You could hear sniffles. You could feel hearts changing. "When I lost that fight," he said, "I didn't just lose a match. I lost my fear. I learned that pain can break your body, but it can also build your soul." He pointed toward the crowd again, his eyes fierce but kind. "Some of you here are going through something right now. Maybe failure, heartbreak, or rejection. But I'm here to tell you this is not your ending. This is your turning point." The hall erupted in applause once more. Louder, longer, more emotional. Manny smiled, nodding humbly, and finished the part with these words. "Don't be afraid of failure. Be afraid of giving up too soon. Because every champion was once a beginner who refused to quit." The lights dimmed slightly as the audience stood up. A standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. Manny bowed, pressed his hand to his chest, and whispered, "Thank you." Then he looked into the camera again and said, "If you've ever failed but refused to quit, you're already a champion. Have you ever turned your pain into power? Because your comeback might be the hope someone else needs today." The crowd's applause slowly faded, but the energy in the room only grew stronger. Manny stood tall on stage, his voice steady and filled with quiet power. He looked around the hall, eyes landing on young faces full of ambition, doubt, and hope. Then he asked softly, "Do you know what's harder than becoming a champion?" The audience stayed silent. "Staying one," Manny said. "Because when you win, people cheer. But when you win too long, people forget you're human." He smiled faintly. "When I first won a world title, I thought that was it. I thought success would make everything easy, but I learned that success comes with new battles, pride, pressure, and temptation. He paused, letting the words sink in. The world will try to tell you that fame, money, and attention are the rewards of hard work. But the truth is they are only tests of your character. The audience listened, completely still. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. I've met fighters who had everything, talent, money, fame, and still lost themselves because they forgot the most important thing, why they started. He placed his hand over his heart. I started fighting because I wanted to feed my family, but over time I realized I was fighting for something bigger, to inspire others, to give hope to people who had none. Manny's tone softened, his voice almost trembling with emotion. There were moments when I was surrounded by luxury, but I felt empty inside. That's when I understood, victory doesn't fill your heart, purpose does. A student in the front row wiped away a tear. Another whispered, "That's real." Manny smiled gently. "That's why I tell young fighters, never forget where you came from. Because the moment you forget your struggle, you lose your strength." He raised his finger slightly as if teaching a lesson that came straight from his soul. The heart of a champion isn't built in the gym. It's built in the moments you choose humility over pride, service over fame, and gratitude over greed. The hall echoed with silence, the kind that makes every word feel heavier, holier. Manny stepped closer to the microphone and said quietly, "You can have all the medals in the world, but if your heart is empty, you have nothing." Then a small smile. "But if your heart is full of love, faith, and purpose, even if you have nothing, you already have everything." The audience erupted in applause. People stood up, clapping not for his victories, but for his truth. He raised his hand gently to calm them, and continued, "When I meet people on the street, some call me champ, others call me hero. But what truly matters is not what they call you. It's what you call yourself when you look in the mirror." He let the words hang in the air, then added, "Ask yourself, am I proud of the person I'm becoming? Not because of what I have, but because of what I give." You could see the effect his words had. Heads nodding, tears forming, hearts opening. "When you live for something bigger than yourself," he said, "you never lose. Even when you fall forward into growth, into wisdom, into purpose." He took one last deep breath, his voice soft but strong. "Every punch I threw in the ring, every time I stood up after being knocked down, I wasn't just fighting for a title. I was fighting for the kid I used to be, the one who believed that with faith and hard work, anything is possible." The lights above glowed softly as the crowd began to cheer again, this time not out of excitement but admiration. Manny smiled, nodded, and ended with a line that echoed through every heart in the room. "A true champion doesn't fight to be better than others. A true champion fights to be better than who he was yesterday." The room erupted. People stood on their feet, clapping, cheering, crying, because they weren't just listening to a boxing legend. They were listening to a man who had turned pain into purpose and fame into faith. The applause slowly faded, replaced by a deep, powerful silence, the kind that only comes when hearts are truly moved. Manny stood still, looking across the sea of faces in front of him. There were students, workers, parents, and even elderly people, all different stories, but one shared feeling, inspiration. He took a small sip of water, then spoke softly, his tone filled with warmth and conviction. "You know, people ask me, 'Manny, what's the secret to your success?' And I always tell them, it's not power, not speed, not luck. It's hope." He paused. "Hope kept me alive when I had nothing. Hope told me one more round. Hope told me one more day. Hope told me, don't stop now." The audience nodded. His voice was steady but emotional, each word cutting through the silence. "When you lose everything, hope is the only thing that whispers, try again." He took a step forward, closer to the crowd. His presence filled the entire room. There were days I wanted to give up. There were nights I cried because I didn't see a future. I remember one night I was so tired and hungry that I asked God, "Why do I have to suffer so much?" He looked up slightly, eyes shimmering under the lights. And I felt an answer in my heart. "Because one day you will use your pain to help others." A deep silence followed. You could see people wiping tears, holding their breath. "And that's what I want to tell you today," he continued. "Your pain has a purpose. It's not the end of your story. It's the part that will make your story worth telling. He smiled softly. Maybe you failed your exams. Maybe someone broke your heart. Maybe life pushed you down. But listen to me. Failure is not final. It's just feedback. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. Some clapped quietly. Some nodded with tears in their eyes. Manny lifted his hand again. Don't ever think your mistakes define you. They refine you. They make you wiser, stronger, more human. He pointed gently toward the audience. There's someone here who feels like they're done. Like life has no meaning. I'm here to tell you, you are not done. You are in training. The line hit like thunder. He continued more passionately now. When I was young, every defeat hurt me deeply. I thought I was a failure. But now I understand, and every time I fell, I was learning something new about myself. I was learning that I could rise again. He took a deep breath and said, You can lose money. You can lose friends. You can lose strength. But don't ever lose hope, because hope will rebuild everything you lose. The crowd began to clap softly again. I've seen people rise from nothing, he said. I've seen a poor boy become a champion. I've seen tears turn into triumphs. If it can happen to me, it can happen to you. His words filled the room like light through darkness. Don't wait for perfect timing. Don't wait for people to believe in you. Start now, with what you have, where you are, because small beginnings lead to great victories. He smiled again, voice calm but firm. And when you rise, don't forget to lift someone else with you. The purpose of success is not to stand above others, but to reach down and pull others up. People began clapping again, this time longer, louder, more emotional. But Manny raised his hand to quiet them. Let me tell you something I've learned, he said. When you bless others, you don't lose anything. You multiply your blessings. Because every act of kindness comes back to you in ways you can't imagine. He paused, then continued softly. There was a time I thought boxing was my purpose. But now I know my true purpose is to inspire others to fight their own battles and never give up. The audience rose to their feet. Some were recording, others just stood in awe, hands over their hearts. Manny's eyes glistened as he concluded, You might be walking through pain today, but that pain is shaping you into the person you were meant to become. Don't hide your scars. They're proof that you survived. He pointed toward the crowd one last time. Stand tall even when life hits hard, because the greatest victory is not when the world applauds you. It's when you look in the mirror and whisper, I didn't quit. The room exploded in applause. People clapped, cheered, some even shouted, We love you, champ. But Manny just bowed humbly, his hand over his chest, eyes lowered in gratitude. Then he said the final words of that part, words that would echo far beyond the hall. Hope is not something you wait for. It's something you choose in every single day. If you've ever gone through pain but refused to give up, type hope. Let's remind the world that no matter how dark it gets, light always wins. The hall was still trembling from applause when Manny raised his hand again. Slowly, the cheering faded until only the faint hum of the air conditioner remained. His eyes glimmered under the stage lights, calm, focused, purposeful. He took a deep breath, stepped closer to the microphone and said softly, Let's talk about silence. A ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd. Silence after all that energy? In my life, Manny continued, the loudest moments were not in the ring. They were in the quiet hours, when everyone else was sleeping and I was alone with my thoughts. That's when I learned who I really was. He looked at the audience, hundreds of faces looking back at him. You see, when the noise stops, you can finally hear the voice that matters most, the one inside you. He paused again. No music, no movement, just silence. When I was poor, he said, I didn't hear applause. I heard hunger. I heard fear. But I also heard a whisper, and a whisper saying, keep going. That whisper became my greatest coach. People nodded slowly. His voice carried truth that came from scars, not scripts. We all chase noise, he said. Likes, followers, approval, fame. But the greatest strength comes from the moments no one sees. When you are tired, when you are afraid, but you still choose to move. He looked down for a moment, then raised his head with a faint smile. When I was knocked down in the ring, the crowd screamed. But in my heart there was silence, a silence asking one question. Will you stand up? He clenched his fist softly, and I stood up. Every time. The audience fell completely silent now, so silent that you could hear breaths being held. "That's what I want you to remember," he said. "When life knocks you down, don't listen to the noise of fear. Listen to the silence of your soul. It will tell you stand." He began pacing slowly, hands open, voice deep with emotion. "I've seen people who lost everything, jobs, families, homes, but they found peace when they stopped running from silence. Because silence is not empty, it's full of answers." A student whispered to her friend, "This is deeper than I expected." Manny smiled as if he heard her. "You expected a story about boxing. But this is the fight that really matters. The fight inside your mind." He took another deep breath, eyes soft yet fierce. "Every morning before the sun rises, I sit quietly. I thank God for another chance. I remind myself, the world can take your title, your money, your fame, but it can never take your heart unless you give it away." The audience stayed still, mesmerized. Then Manny said something that sent chills through the entire room. "If a poor boy from Mindanao, who sold bread and slept hungry, can stand here today, then you have no excuse to give up." The silence broke, not with applause, but with emotion. You could hear people sniffing, see them wiping tears, clutching their chests. Manny smiled gently. "Don't chase money. Don't chase fame. Chase purpose, because purpose will feed your soul long after fame fades." He let that line hang in the air like sacred truth. After a long pause, he added, "Some of you think you're too small to make a difference. But remember, even the smallest light can defeat the darkest night." The crowd began clapping again, slowly then louder, a standing ovation rising like a wave. Manny waited for the cheers to settle, then leaned into the mic one last time. "Life is not about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to believe." The hall went silent again, total stillness. Then in that sacred quiet, Manny bowed his head. For nearly 10 seconds, no one moved. It wasn't awkward. It was holy. Everyone felt it. The weight of humility, the echo of hope. When he lifted his head, his eyes were wet but shining. "I'm not special," he said softly. "I'm just someone who refused to quit. And if I can do it, you can too." Applause thundered through the hall again, raw, unstoppable, full of love. People were shouting his name, crying, hugging each other. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by emotion. But Manny simply smiled and whispered into the mic, "Remember, champions are not made of muscles. They're made of moments like this, when the world goes quiet and you choose to rise." He looked into the camera broadcasting live and said his final words of the night. "If this message touched your heart, promise me one thing, never give up on yourself. Because as long as you breathe, you still have one more round left." Then he bowed deeply, pressed his hand to his chest, and walked off stage. The crowd stood frozen, not clapping now, just staring, awestruck. The room felt lighter, hearts fuller, dreams reignited, and in that stillness one truth rang clear. Manny Pacquiao hadn't just spoken to an audience. He had spoken to every broken dream, every silent prayer, every fighter still standing. If Manny's words touched your soul, type "never give up" that night. The hall stayed full long after Manny Pacquiao left the stage. People were hugging, crying, and sharing what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just a speech, it felt like a spiritual awakening. Phones buzzed. Cameras flashed. Within minutes, clips of Manny's powerful words began to flood the internet. A student posted a short video titled, "Manny Pacquiao's speech will change how you see life forever." In less than an hour, it was everywhere. Millions watched the moment he said, "If I, a poor boy from the streets of Mindanao, can stand here today, then you have no excuse to give up." People around the world stopped scrolling to listen. Office workers, students, athletes, even those battling depression, all found something inside that message that spoke directly to their soul. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. News headlines around the world read, "Manny Pacquiao's words bring millions to tears. Champion's message of faith and hope inspires a global movement." From the Philippines to New York, from small villages to crowded cities, people were talking, not about boxing, but about belief, humility, and second chances. One teacher in Kenya played the speech for her students. A man in Brazil said he found the courage to start over after hearing it. A single mother in India wrote, "I was about to give up, but his words gave me hope again." Manny's story had crossed languages, borders, And backgrounds because his message was universal. Never stop fighting. Meanwhile, Manny sat quietly at home that night. He wasn't online reading comments or watching views climb. He was with his Bible whispering a prayer of gratitude. He smiled humbly and said to his assistant, "If even one person found hope today, that's enough for me." He didn't need the applause. He had already won the greatest victory, touching hearts. Later that week, he was invited to speak again, this time at an international event streamed to millions. But when he stepped onto the new stage, he didn't talk about fame or success. He began with the same words as before. "I don't want to talk about boxing. I want to talk about life." And just like before, silence fell. Because when truth speaks, the world listens. In the days that followed, the Never Give Up Challenge began trending. People shared their stories, how they'd fallen, failed, struggled, and how they were still standing. One post read, "Manny Pacquiao reminded me that failure is just training for success. I'm getting back up today." Another said, "I was depressed, but after watching his video, I decided to live another day. Thank you, champ." It was no longer about Manny, it was about everyone. Millions of people finding courage in their own silent battles. Weeks later, Manny returned to that same hall where it all began. He looked at the empty seats, smiled, and whispered, This is why I fight." Because for him, the real fight was never in the ring. It was always in the hearts of people who needed hope. As the world continued to celebrate his words, Manny posted a single message on his social media. No hashtags, no sponsors, no filters. Just pure truth. No one should be judged by what they have, but by what they overcome. No matter how many times you fall, rise again, because that's where champions are made. The post broke records, but more importantly, it broke chains, the invisible chains of fear, doubt, and hopelessness. Manny Pacquiao's story had started with hunger and pain, but it ended with something far greater: purpose. His final quote from that event still echoes in hearts around the world. "The real victory in life is not standing on a podium. It's standing tall after life knocks you down." And as the video continued to spread across platforms, across continents, across generations, people everywhere repeated the same word: respect. If you believe in hope, hard work, and respect, type respect in the comments below. Share this story to remind someone that champions are not born. They're built through struggle, faith, and heart. And remember, your fight isn't over yet. It's just beginning.